This is Education Without Borders by Wanjiku, the engineer. Today we are going to dealing with structural failure of a retaining wall. Have you, as a structural engineer, encountered such a challenge? Let's see, how do you deal with failure of a retaining wall? Supposing you have a site like that and it consists of a number of retaining walls, and you have designed the walls to the best of your knowledge, but you find that there is one with some signs of failure. How do you even recognize the signs of failure in the first place so that you can be able to have remedial measures before any catastrophe happens? It's very important as a structural engineer to bear in mind that sometimes you may encounter a challenge like that. So it's important to recognize. One of the ways you can do is, once you realize that maybe there is a serious fault, maybe you can demolish, you can recommend a demolition of a section of the wall. And that brings me to an important point that we need to highlight, is that the retaining walls need to have joints, construction joints, expansion joints, so that if you were to bring down one section, you don't have to bring down all of them. For example, from this photograph, you can see a retaining wall, but there's a section that is found to have had distress signs, and it was possible to bring it down safely and then start doing it all over again. You can see from that photograph that we have an intact retaining wall, but a section that needs to be redone. How do you now marry the new section with the existing one? There are many ways. If you look at the foreground where my cursor is, you can see one of the signs, the backfield. The backfield had some distress signs. If you have to look out for such signs, such distress signs, expansions, cracking, because they shouldn't be there if the ground was consolidated properly. Otherwise, they are created when you start having some movements within a retaining wall. And if that happens, it's important to make a decision right away. So in this particular case, the decision was to just do away with that retaining wall, and then start building up using a different material. If you look at that material which was there originally, it was red soil, which consolidates, and it consolidated and maybe was not able to provide proper seepage pads, so that you find the retaining wall was stressed and it had to be removed. And part of this material also has to be replaced with heavy boulders or rocks or stones, which are able to provide the necessary weeping of the ground, especially when you have very heavy rains, or during constructions, maybe when the landscaping has not been properly done, proper drainages are not in place yet, you need to retain the earth. You have to take into consideration all that. And therefore, you can see from that photograph, we have now our soil, which has been allowed to take its natural slope, which we call the natural angle of repose. And if it can be allowed to stay like that without interfering, then you create a foundation and fill in between with different materials. So our soil was allowed to stay under its own natural angle. Then it was some thin layer of mortar was poured to make sure it's retained that way. One, so that you don't pose any danger to the workers, and two, to make sure that it's retained in that state. You know, the retaining in this case is also using soft mortar. The white stuff you find is very thin, weak mortar that is able to hold the earth in its natural angle of ripples. And then we are able to do a foundation, a new foundation, or a separate foundation that is separate from the existing wall, and then fill the space in between with the necessary rocks or hardcore materials, which are able to drain properly without exerting a lot of lateral pressure on our retaining wall. So that is what one of the solutions that I'm showing there. So this is a closer view of the material that replaces red soil. You can see is hardcore. Hardcore is able to take water in and make it pass through, and we're still protecting our soil, our red soil, because it had been brought in, it was artificial, and therefore it was exerting a lot of lateral pressure on our external retaining wall. And this is extended to the existing wall, so that we have a layer of not less than 1.2 meters of that soil, hardcore, so that if there's any water surface runoff, is taken down, and there are weep holes which allow the water to weep out and relieve the retaining wall from the pressure. And that is also the same view from the other direction, that we fill all the way up with this kind of material as opposed to red soil. So that is one solution of dealing with a failing retaining wall. If you're interested in such content, then view or visit my channel, like it, share it, subscribe, and don't forget to also comment. Give me a comment.